The gates of Graceland never truly closed. Even at midnight, when the Memphis air turned thick and silver under the moonlight, someone was always standing outside, whispering his name like a prayer. They called him the King. They believed the mansion behind those iron bars was a palace of endless music and untouchable happiness. To the world, Elvis Presley lived a perfect life. Gold records stacked like trophies of war, rooms glowing with chandeliers, fans screaming so loud the earth itself seemed to shake. But perfection is a performance, and inside those walls, a little girl was beginning to understand the difference between the man on the stage and the man who walked the halls at night. Lisa Marie Presley was too young to articulate it, but she could feel it. The silence between the applause was always louder than the applause itself. She would sit at the top of the staircase, small hands wrapped around the railing, listening to the echo of her father's boots on marble floors. When he returned from tour, the house would explode with movement, bodyguards, assistants, laughter forced a little too hard. Elvis would sweep her into his arms, calling her his only girl, his princess. In those moments, he looked invincible, his sunglasses still on, his smile wide, his voice playful. But later, always later, Lisa would see him alone. The sunglasses gone, the smile gone, the crown set down on a bedside table no one else dared touch. The public believed Graceland was a kingdom of celebration. Reporters described jungle-themed rooms and velvet couches like they were symbols of excess and joy. They never described the long corridors at 3 a.m., when the lights stayed on because Elvis hated the dark. They never described the way he paced, restless, as though the walls were closing in on him. Lisa would wake to faint music drifting through the house. Old gospel hymns played softly on the piano. Sometimes she would pad down the hallway in bare feet and find him sitting alone, fingers hovering over the keys, staring at nothing. "You should be asleep, baby girl," he would say gently, but his eyes looked miles away. She didn't understand fame. She understood moods. She understood that some nights her father's laugh filled every room, and other nights it disappeared entirely. The world outside those gates grew louder each year. Concerts sold out in minutes. Fans fainted at the mere sight of him. Television hosts introduced him as the greatest entertainer alive. Headlines painted a portrait of triumph. But triumph has a cost, and Lisa began noticing the small signs, the locked bathroom doors, the hushed conversations between adults when they thought she wasn't listening, prescription bottles that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Once, during a lavish party thrown for industry elites, Lisa hid beneath a grand piano to escape the noise. She watched polished shoes shuffle across marble. She heard laughter that sounded sharp, almost desperate. Then she saw her father standing perfectly still in the center of the room, surrounded by admirers, yet somehow alone. His smile held firm, but his hand trembled just slightly as he lifted his drink. That was the first time she realized something important. Everyone wanted a piece of Elvis, but no one seemed to ask if he was tired of being shared. To the fans, he was eternal. To Lisa, he was human. She saw the exhaustion after tours, how he would sleep through afternoons, curtains drawn tight against the sun. She saw the frustration when critics questioned his choices, when expectations grew heavier than gold records. "They don't know me," he muttered once, thinking she was too far away to hear. But she heard everything. Children notice more than adults believe. She noticed the way security tightened, how visitors were filtered carefully. She noticed the arguments whispered behind closed doors. And she noticed the fear, subtle but present. Fear of fading, fear of disappointing the millions who believed he could never fall. One evening, as thunder rolled over Memphis, the power flickered inside Graceland. The staff panicked briefly, scrambling for candles. Lisa found her father standing by a window, watching lightning split the sky. For a moment, the mansion felt small, almost fragile against the storm. "Daddy, are you scared?" she asked softly. He turned, surprised, then knelt to her height. "Not of storms," he said,
But his voice carried a truth he didn't finish. He wasn't afraid of thunder. He was afraid of silence. Because when the crowd noise stopped, when the stage lights went dark, there was only him and the weight he carried. The world believed Elvis had everything: money, fame, devotion. And he did. But Lisa began to understand that having everything could mean losing something else: privacy, rest, the ability to simply exist without being watched. Late at night, she would hear him speaking on the phone in low tones, negotiations and promises tangled together.
The king never clocked out. Even at home, he was expected to be larger than life. But children don't want legends. They want fathers. Lisa wanted the man who told her bedtime stories in a soft southern drawl. She wanted the father who let her sit on his lap while he played guitar, teaching her chords like secrets. And she sensed, long before she had words for it, that the world's version of Elvis was slowly consuming hers. Outside, fans pressed against the gates, leaving flowers and letters. Inside, a little girl watched the myth grow taller than the man. She saw how the performance never truly ended. Even joy sometimes looked rehearsed. And as part one of their story unfolded, one quiet truth settled into her young heart. Elvis's life looked perfect because it had to. The illusion fed the empire. But behind the velvet curtains and gold records was a man fighting battles no one applauded. And Lisa Marie Presley, still just a child wandering marble hallways, was the only one beginning to see the cracks forming in the crown. Morning at Graceland never arrived gently. It came with engines humming beyond the gates, with deliveries, with men checking radios, with assistants already whispering schedules before the sun fully climbed over Memphis. For the world, this house was proof that Elvis Presley had won life itself. For Lisa Marie Presley, it was a place where doors were always half open and conversations stopped when she entered the room. She began to notice a pattern. Mornings determined what kind of day it would be. If Elvis woke laughing, the mansion felt like a carnival. If he woke quiet, everyone adjusted their tone, their footsteps softer, their smiles cautious. Fame had turned into weather, and everyone inside the house learned to dress for it. On good days, Elvis filled the kitchen with stories. He would flip through newspapers, mocking the headlines that exaggerated his wealth or speculated about his health. "They don't know nothing, baby girl," he would say, folding the paper with a dramatic snap. But Lisa watched his eyes linger just a second too long on certain lines. Articles about canceled appearances, rumors about exhaustion, questions about whether the king was losing his edge. He never admitted those words hurt. He didn't have to. The way his jaw tightened told her enough. By afternoon, rehearsals sometimes began in the music room. Musicians arrived with careful enthusiasm. Guitars tuned, drums tested. When Elvis sang, the entire house seemed to breathe again. His voice still carried that velvet thunder that made strangers cry in arenas. Lisa would sit cross-legged on the floor, mesmerized. In those moments, he wasn't a headline. He wasn't a brand. He was pure sound and soul. But between songs, something shifted. He moved slower. He reached for a glass of water, then something stronger. A pill bottle would appear briefly in his hand, then disappear into a pocket as if it had never existed. The band pretended not to notice. So did the staff. Lisa pretended too. Children become experts at pretending when adults teach them how. One evening, an argument cracked through the hallway like a gunshot. The words were muffled, but the tension was sharp. Lisa stood frozen near the staircase, heart pounding. She caught fragments: tour dates, doctors, rest, responsibility. The argument wasn't about music, it was about limits. Elvis emerged minutes later, face calm, sunglasses already back in place, though the sun had long set. He spotted Lisa instantly. "Hey, princess," he said, voice steady. But his hand brushed the wall for balance when he thought no one saw. She saw. That was the night she realized perfection required maintenance. It wasn't natural, it was engineered. Outside the gates, fans believed he lived in constant celebration. They imagined laughter echoing endlessly through jungle-themed rooms and gold-trimmed halls. They didn't imagine the locked bedroom doors during long afternoons. They didn't imagine the staff speaking in low voices about medication schedules. They didn't imagine the way Elvis sometimes avoided mirrors, passing them quickly as if his own reflection might question him. One storm-heavy night, Lisa wandered into the living room and found him alone, television flickering silently. Old concert footage played across the screen.
Elvis younger, thinner, unstoppable. The crowd roared from decades past. He watched himself like a stranger. "They loved that guy," he murmured. Lisa stepped closer. "They love you," she said with childlike certainty. He smiled at her reflection in the dark screen. "Yeah," he replied softly, "but they don't see the parts in between." That sentence stayed with her. The parts in between. The hours after applause faded. The drive home from a show when adrenaline drained away and silence filled the car. The late-night calls with managers calculating profits while he stared out windows at nothing. Lisa began to understand that fame froze people in time.
The public wanted the version of Elvis that fit their memory. They wanted the rebel, the heartthrob, the voice that shook the South. They did not want a tired man, battling expectations heavier than the mansion he lived in. And so he kept performing, even when there was no stage. At a lavish dinner attended by celebrities and industry elites, Lisa watched her father move from table to table, charming every guest. He laughed loudly, told stories, shook hands. Cameras flashed. The king delivered exactly what was expected. But when dessert was served, she noticed his shoulders slump for a fraction of a second. A flicker. A crack. He caught her looking and straightened instantly, winking as if to reassure her. The show must go on, even at home. Later that night, she overheard a doctor's voice in the study. Calm, clinical. Words like dosage and restraint drifted through the door. Lisa didn't fully understand medicine, but she understood fear. The adults inside Graceland were afraid of something slipping beyond control. And Elvis, the man who commanded stadiums, seemed powerless against the quiet battles fought in his own body. The contradiction haunted her. How could someone so powerful look so fragile when no one else was watching? Days blended into a rhythm of spectacle and secrecy, public triumph, private strain. The illusion of perfection required constant reinforcement, like repainting a wall to hide cracks spreading underneath. Lisa started keeping small observations to herself, the way his laughter sometimes ended abruptly, like a record scratched mid-song, the way he gripped the banister while climbing stairs, the way conversations about taking a break always ended with him insisting, "The fans are counting on me." The fans, they were both his strength and their cage. As part 2 unfolds, one truth becomes unavoidable. Elvis wasn't just fighting critics or rumors. He was fighting the impossible standard of being Elvis Presley every second of every day. And Lisa Marie, still young but no longer unaware, began to carry a silent knowledge. The world would defend the myth at all costs, but she was witnessing the man beneath it, tired, human, determined, and slowly cornered by the very perfection everyone believed he lived. And somewhere in the growing tension between image and reality, the cracks widened just a little more. By the time the tour buses rolled back through the gates of Graceland again, the applause had already begun to fade from memory, replaced by something heavier. The crowd still screamed for Elvis Presley, still reached for him as if touching his sleeve could heal their lives. But inside the mansion, the energy felt different now, thinner, stretched tight like a wire about to snap. Lisa Marie Presley sensed it before anyone said a word. Children feel tension the way sailors feel a storm in their bones. The house staff moved faster but spoke softer. Phone calls lasted longer. Doors closed more firmly. And Elvis, once electric even in silence, carried a weight that seemed to follow him from room to room like a shadow that refused to attach. One afternoon, Lisa watched from the staircase as he returned from rehearsal earlier than planned. The band had left quickly, their goodbyes polite but uneasy. Elvis walked in without his usual flourish. No dramatic entrance, no playful greeting. He removed his sunglasses slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose as though the light itself hurt. "Cancel tomorrow," he muttered to an assistant. "Just cancel it." The word hung in the air like a forbidden spell. Canceling meant weakness. Canceling meant headlines. Canceling meant admitting he wasn't invincible. The assistant hesitated, then nodded. Lisa saw something flicker across her father's face. Not relief, exactly. More like frustration at himself for needing rest at all. That night, thunderclouds gathered over Memphis again, thick and low. Elvis sat at the piano in the dimly lit music room, pressing the same chord over and over, letting it echo into the quiet. Lisa stepped inside without speaking. She had learned that sometimes silence was safer than questions. He didn't look at her when he said, "You ever feel like everybody wants a piece of you?" She considered the question seriously, as children do. "I only want you," she answered.
The simplicity of her reply seemed to wound him more than any critic ever could. He turned then, eyes soft but rimmed with exhaustion. "That's the problem, baby girl," he whispered. "They all do." The next weeks blurred into a pattern of extremes. One night he was unstoppable on stage, voice rising like a cathedral choir, commanding thousands with a single note. The next day he could barely rise from bed, curtains drawn tight against daylight. Doctors visited more frequently. Conversations grew sharper. Lisa once overheard the phrase "point of no return" spoken in a hushed, urgent tone. She didn't know exactly what it meant, but she understood it wasn't good.
It sounded like a cliff edge you didn't see until you were already falling. During a small private gathering at the mansion, industry friends filled the living room with laughter again, pretending everything was fine. Music played, glasses clinked. Elvis performed for them willingly, strumming his guitar, smiling wide. But halfway through a song, his hand faltered. Just a second, just enough. The chord rang wrong. The room froze. He recovered instantly, finishing the verse with professional grace, yet Lisa felt her stomach drop. The king had stumbled. No one mentioned it afterward. They complimented him louder instead, as if praise could erase what they'd seen. That was the night she realized something terrifying. The people around him needed him to be perfect more than they needed him to be well. Perfection paid salaries. Perfection protected reputations. Perfection sold tickets. And so the machine kept turning, even when the engine started to smoke. One early morning, unable to sleep, Lisa wandered into the hallway and saw light spilling from beneath her father's study door. She pushed it open quietly. Elvis sat at his desk surrounded by papers, contracts, schedules, financial reports. He looked smaller somehow, dwarfed by obligations. "You should be dreaming," he told her gently. "I had a bad one," she admitted. He studied her face carefully. "About what?" She hesitated. "That you were on stage and everyone was cheering, but you couldn't hear them." The words seemed to pierce him. He leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling. "Sometimes," he said after a long pause, "it's real quiet up there." That confession changed something in her. The stage, the roaring crowds, the flashing cameras, none of it guaranteed connection. None of it guaranteed peace. Fame amplified sound, but it didn't silence doubt. As pressure mounted, whispers from the outside world grew louder. Critics speculated. Tabloids circled like vultures. Every canceled show became a scandal. Every visible sign of fatigue turned into rumor. Elvis responded the only way he knew how, by pushing harder. More rehearsals, more appearances, more proof that he was still the king. But the harder he pushed, the more fragile the balance felt. Lisa began to notice moments where his temper flared unexpectedly, quick flashes of anger that vanished as fast as they came. Not cruelty, frustration. At himself, at the expectations, at the invisible cage built from gold records and screaming fans. One evening, she found him standing in front of a mirror in his bedroom, staring at his reflection as if trying to negotiate with it. "You okay, Daddy?" she asked quietly. He forced a grin, adjusting his collar. Never better. But his eyes told a different story. They looked like a man arguing with time itself. The turning point came quietly, without announcement. A doctor left the house late one night with a face too serious to ignore. An assistant canceled another appearance. The phones rang endlessly. Lisa watched from the staircase again, heart pounding. She could feel something shifting, like the air before lightning strikes. The illusion of perfection was cracking, and everyone inside Graceland knew it. They just didn't know how to stop it. As part 3 closes, the stakes have risen. The king is still standing, still performing, still smiling for the world, but the space between applause and silence is growing wider. Lisa Marie now understands that loving a legend means watching him fight battles he cannot win alone. The crown still shines under stage lights, but in the quiet hallways of Graceland, the weight of it has become almost unbearable. And somewhere in that widening silence, a decision is approaching, one that will change everything, whether the world is ready to see it or not.